Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. So glad to be together with you today. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I got my granddaughter upstairs, so once in a while I hear her give out a little noise upstairs. And then we got Jerry Washington outside mowing my grass. You might hear him as he goes, you can tell when he goes in a circle because he goes close to the house. But that sanctifies my yard because he goes to World Revival Church. Great friend. Great guy for many years. And so I know I got a sanctified yard. So if you hear that mower go by, it doesn't worry me any. I know it's there. He is out there covering my yard with the Spirit of the Lord. But we got some interesting things to talk about today. What an important time for all of us to get our heads, our hearts together on Jesus. This is not the time to get lax for me. As you know, last week I mentioned I feel like a page is turned into a new era. And in the world, how long it'll last depends a lot on us and the church, what the church does. And the problem with that, as I said last week, and will continue to say, is the church is basically clueless, doesn't realize the role that the Church of Jesus Christ, clear down if it has to be just down to our local church. It won't be, but you have to think like that. We can't say, well, the mega church over there is not doing anything. They're still just going about their business, making mega, doing mega. You can't do that. The COVID came back again and we had to cancel some services and now we're coming on again. But I could tell Sunday the crowd was down a little bit. But this week we're going to hit it again. Kathy will be speaking tomorrow night on spiritual warfare. We're going to start up again, and believe God and come together again and start having church again. So those are all good things. Now's the time. Get yourself together on God. Don't get distracted. Now's not the time, because I believe a page is turned and we're going to be tested in our hearts, in our faith, in our decisions. Yeah, in our decisions on how are we going to serve the Lord. How committed are we going to be? Tested in our commitment coming up. So now's the time to get serious. Now's not the time to get lax. But we talked about that last week, the flood generation, where a flood was coming. Noah was trying to tell them a flood was coming, and the people were clueless. They had no idea a flood was coming. They had no idea why a flood was coming. So this Sunday in church, don't want to miss that. This Sunday in church, I'm going to be preaching a prophetic sermon called The Coming Flood. And we'll be bouncing off that for some time probably, but that'll be this coming Sunday. Friday night, we're still working on that service. We'll let you know what's happening, but we will have a service. But what we're exactly going to do, we're still working on that. But this is important times. This is important times for you to get settled on God and make sure you're giving to God. Make sure your finances, you're including God in your finances. Make sure. Got to do that now because of everything. We'll be talking about it. The coming flood as we do it in today a little bit. Finances. Make sure that your heart is set on the Lord. You're not being distracted by entertainment, getting lax, getting depressed, feeling like, well, maybe I'll wander here and go find a new church there or whatever. Make sure you're in a church that's going to serve the Lord, that's serious and hearing from God. You do not want to get into a church that's all about you. You better get into a church that's all about God. The gospel of Jesus Christ. We're going to look in the book of Mark in just a second. First line says the gospel about Jesus Christ. This got to be about him. And I've listened to sermons. I go on, online too. I go through these things. I listen to bits and pieces of some stuff, and I can't find Jesus in there. Now, it's based on truth of Jesus, but it's all about us. And you got to get on into a church and love a church that's about Jesus Christ. Get your finances, get your heart on the Lord. Make sure that you're in a group that says, we're going to be committed to Jesus. We're going to fix our eyes on Jesus. We're not going to get our eyes off of it and get distracted and discouraged. And after you hear the sermon on Sunday, the flood, you'll understand it much, much better. All right. So these are important times. So I went to the book of Mark and just reflecting this morning on that. About when Jesus went in. You remember when Jesus went in to the temple And most of the time we know that he went into the temple and, he turned over the tables and the money changers. And out of that, we get a lot of sermons, lots and lots of sermons for hundreds of years about how God's against money. And Jesus went in and turned the tables over, and so God must be against money. Has nothing to do with that. He said, you've made this a den of robbers. It's the way they were treating the people, not the way they were treating money. See, they were robbing the people of money. They were cheating the people. They were money changers and interests and just a lot of crooked things going on. And he said, this house is supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations. And of course, they didn't, the Jews of that time, they didn't want all nations. They didn't want all this. So they had, the outer court and the inner court, and they had the court of the Gentiles. And then they had just the inner court just for them. And the Holy of Holies, which was empty, didn't have presence of God. The glory of God wasn't in there. But anyway, so they're going about their business, and Jesus goes in, as you know, and he just, in Gospel of John, he makes a whip, and he's cracking a whip, maybe. That's where we get that phrase. And going in, he turns the money, the changers over, and and throws them out and all that kind of stuff. Well, we would get kind of, if that's all we read, we might get the idea, well, this is about God's against money. No, he's against dishonesty, but he's really against something else that we miss. What happened was, because Jesus went in more than one time, 2 or 3 times, what happened was he went in the temple, and then he went and looked around, and he went back out again. And the problem was, when he went back out again, went in, went back out again, what he saw out and what he saw in was no different. No different. What he saw in and what he saw out of the temple was no different. And so that's the problem. See, there was no difference. And this is the battle that we are up against now. I'm trying to help you get saved and rescued. You remember Noah built an ark to save his family. Now, every family could have done it. They just didn't believe it, But he built an ark to save his family. I'm trying to get you to save your family, save yourself, save your family, help your relatives understand what's coming, okay? And so I want you to pay attention on every area of this, that this is not just about Jesus coming in and he's against money. So as long as we don't sell T-shirts in the sanctuary, we're okay. That's what it's gotten down to. Ridiculous, of course. But it's about, he went in and he couldn't find any spirits different. He'd come off the street and he'd be discerning spirits on the street. And then he'd go into the temple and discern spirits. Same spirit, same spirits. And that's what it was so upsetting to him. He said that it's a den of robbers. Well, what? It's not a den of robbers on the street? Yeah, it's a den of robbers on the street. And then he goes into the house of God, and it's a den of robbers in the house of God. And he says, oh my. And so that's where all this turmoil came. And he went in and out, So what I want to talk to you about then, to help you understand it better, is what he did to the fig tree. So, he goes in Jerusalem, and before he goes into the court, then into the temple, he sees a fig tree, and you might remember the story, and it doesn't have figs on it, and it should, and all that kind of stuff, and it just had leaves, and there's a whole lot of great sermons on that. But anyway, he curses the fig tree. And it says here in Mark, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And it says the disciples heard him say that. Then he goes into the temple, and that's when he turns the tables over and everything. And then he leaves, and then when evening came, and he went out of the city. Then he comes back in the morning as they went along. Then again, now it's the next day, and then the disciples noticed. They said, look, the fig tree that you cursed has completely withered, died, clear down to the roots. Okay? So here we have the fig tree cursed and withered, and Jesus said, have faith in God. You could say not to just a tree. You could say to a mountain, be cast into the sea, and it'll obey you. Well, as you know, if you've heard me teach before, that when he said you could say to the mountain, he's not pointing to Pikes Peak, right? No, he's pointing to the Temple Mount. See, the temple's on a mount. You've heard of the Temple Mount. If you haven't, you knew it. You just have. And he's pointing to the Temple Mount, and he's saying you could say to this mount or this Temple Mount, be cast into the sea, be tossed into the sea and not doubt. Well, what does that mean? You see, then the passage is going to come along later in all the Gospels where the Temple Mount 40 years later is going to be trampled underfoot by the Romans, and the temple's going to be destroyed and Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. So he is acting out and speaking out of what is going to happen to Jerusalem 40 years later, right? Yes. So that's what's going on here. So when he turns the tables over inside the temple, he's letting the people know this is how God feels about your religion. This is how he feels about it. He's not near as happy as you think he is. And so the thing that God was disturbed about is no distinction, right? You go off the street, got all those spirits, you go into the church, you go into the synagogue, same spirits, same worldliness, same pride, same selfishness, same everybody's offended and angry and all about me, and they don't want it to be about you and all that kind of stuff. And so when he sees that fig tree, he curses it and he said, here's the problem. Here's the problem. We've got fruitless religion on our hands. We got religion, but we got fruitless religion. In other words, you could go into the temple and you could see the action. I mean, they're doing sacrifices and they're changing the money and, they're going through the motions of it. But guess what? Nobody's being changed. Nobody's being changed. Nobody is encountering God. They're encountering religion. I think some of them, some of the genuine people that went in there, they went in there and repented. There had to be some people genuinely repenting. They gave their turtle doves or anything. It was real treacherous because they were supposed to sacrifice the turtle doves or whatever, and they wouldn't do it. They found a way to do it. They'd walk around the back and bring them out front again and sell them to somebody else. And then that guy said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to go sacrifice these turtle doves for my sins." You had to have the shedding of blood. And then they'd take them in there and go and sell them, and then they'd take them back there and walk them around back and not sacrifice them, bring them back around, sell them again. That's pretty good business. That's why I call it a den of robbers. That's pretty good if you could sell the same turtle doves for about 40 or 50 times in one day and not one bit of blood was shed on them. Well, the people think their sins are being forgiven and not they're just selling turtle doves or whatever over and over and over. So it was dishonest. Well, you didn't have to go to synagogue to see dishonest people. You could go out on the street and see dishonest people. You don't have to go to the street to see prideful people. You could go to church. See prideful people. You don't have to go to the street to go see people that love money. You can go to church and see people that love money and love self, right? Okay, so see the problem? No distinction. There's no line anymore. And so when Jesus sees the fig tree and it doesn't have any fruit on it, a fruitless tree, that represents what? Well, it represents everything, not just Judaism. It represents any time his religion, because he invented the church, right? It's his church. Anytime anything that has to do with Jesus and the kingdom of God and Jesus stops bearing fruit, doesn't have fruit. Got a tree, there's a tree. So there's a church, there's a tree, there's a synagogue, there's a tree, but it doesn't have any fruit on it. Now we got a problem, you see, because the world's not bearing God's kind of fruit, right? Well, then you come into God's house and we're not bearing God's kind of fruit. We might be bearing the world's kind of fruit where we're feeling sorry for ourselves. We're there. Oh, I'm just going to I'll try to get over all my unforgiveness. I'll try. Well, this isn't about try. This is about do. But anyway, and so the same spirit in the world, and you go into God's house in the same spirit, then we got a problem. So we got a tree, but we don't have God's fruit on it. And so anytime you have that happen, then what happens? Well, then Jesus, he'll curse that thing or he'll come against it. Now, a lot of people don't realize that when the temple was destroyed 40 years later, that was a visitation from God. And so the church has been confused about that. They think that Jesus only comes back one time, at the second coming. No, it's not a second. There is a coming back, of course, and we call it the second coming, bodily coming. But he visits a lot through centuries in judgment and blessing. He comes to bless. He comes in revivals. He comes and opens the floodgates of heaven, but also, like he did in Jerusalem then in 70 AD, then he came in judgment, right? He came in judgment. And so, and he did come, right? And so here he's saying this is what's going to happen. So look at that fig tree. That's what's going to happen. If religion, his church, his synagogue, kingdom of God, whatever it is that belongs to God, stops bearing the fruit that God's after, not the fruit that we like, but God's fruit, then we're going to have to deal with the correction, right? We got to be corrected and turn this thing around. And that's what this is about. And so here we are in a day when we can go to church just like they could go to the synagogue. See, that you could go into the synagogue, you can go into church, and nobody's life has changed. Nobody even considers serving God more than when before they walked in. They walk in, they walk out, right? They're living for themselves. So you can argue with me all you want to and say, well, I think you're being a little tough, or you shouldn't judge them, or you shouldn't say that, and just love them, and they get to have church their way, and you have church your way. We can go through all that kind of junk if you want to. It's not going to change the fact that the fig tree is in trouble, and it's going to start showing it. All right, because you can say to this mountain, "Be cast into the sea." So the religion of Jesus' day is in trouble. It's in trouble. And it'll happen, he says. It'll happen. And so here we have a mountain of religion on our hands. Bigger than that, their mountain. We got a mountain of religion. It's on the internet. It's on TV. It's everywhere on radio. You go across my FM station on my radio, like Christian, country, Christian. What is that? I can't tell. Christian. I mean, it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere. We got T-shirts, jewelry. We got everything Christian everywhere. The one thing we don't have is a changed life. We got people wanting to be changed. They're saying the right prayers. We got people wanting to serve God. They're saying the right things. But the empowering power of revival has gone through our fingers. And so now we got a tree, got lots of trees. I can go out my house and see lots of churches. Don't have to drive far and start seeing lots of churches. We got lots of churches, but we don't have lots of fruit. Now we have what we call fruit. What we call fruit is families coming together and making friends, right? Making friends and making people feel better about themselves in their current condition, right? Helping them to keep going, encouraging them. Okay, that's good, but that's not God's fruit. God's fruit is a transformation, changed into the image of God, and loosing ourselves from all the spirits of the world that were in this temple when Jesus walked in there. See, all that junk, that dishonesty and selfishness and pride and ego and love of money and all that stuff that was in there. He said, we're going to get loose of all that. So what's happening is now we're entering in the mode of correction. The mode of correction. We could have chosen revival and to give our hearts fully to God, but the church decided it liked its way it was. Now we're going into a mode of correction, and we're going to have to, because the Bible says God corrects those he loves. So it doesn't love us. We're going into a mode of correction. So you can expect to see a lot of symptoms that you're going to need God on your side. You're going to have to turn to God to get help. Gas is going to go up. Wait till you start shopping for Christmas presents. If you can find them, wait till that hits, that's not going to be too far off. Gas prices, buying stuff, trying to buy, if you wanted to build a house and get enough lumber and just supplies, and inflation, threats of wars and rumors of wars. We already talked about Afghanistan and that mess over there, and just on and on. The list is going to go: border crisis, COVID, other variants. It's going to be around everywhere, except for the people of God then say, we got to turn to the living God. We've got to start serving the Lord God. Let's choose this day who we will serve. As for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord, and you say the same, and you, we start turning to the living God. We can turn this thing around, and we'll start getting fruitful religion. The fig tree, the olive tree, which is our tree really, will start bearing fruit again. Not humanism fruit, but God's kind of fruit, a changed life that lives for Jesus. So there you go. That's where my heart is. Make sure you keep posted what's going on in our church. Get there. Tell your friends about this. You know, they can get 1,000 podcasts and 1,000 Facebook stuff, and all it'll do is feed their self, but it won't rescue the church or them. So you start telling people, you get on there and text, and you send, and you Facebook, and you tell people you need to hear, you need to follow this Facebook, you need to follow this Instagram, you need to follow this Twitter, and you need to start streaming, even if it's not during regular church time. You need to streaming World Revival Church and start getting these messages, especially get some spiritual warfare Wednesday night, and especially this coming Sunday when we start talking about the coming flood. You don't want to miss it. You don't want the people you love to miss it. All right. I hope you got this message today. So glad we could be together. Love you all. Until next time. Bye-bye.